After 3 long years since he was first qualified, Behrooz Tabani has finally been granted his US travel visa and will at long last be able to compete at the Mr. Olympia contest. Not to be hyperbolic, but this changes almost everything. We simply don't know how Behrooz is going to compare against the best of the best. He's faced a couple of top guys here and there, but this will be his first time in an actual Olympia level lineup. With that said, I have no idea who to compare him to. So I just went with someone that's completely different, but also in a similar boat. In today's video, Behrooz will be going against Nick Walker. For one, they're polar opposite physiques, so this should be fun. And two, Nick hasn't been to the Olympia in 2 years, so he's going to also be a big what-if question. With those things in mind, I figured comparing Nick to Behrooz would be as good of a matchup as any to start with. So with all that out of the way, let's go ahead and jump into today's video to compare Behrooz Tabani's 2025 Dubai Pro package against Nick Walker's 2025 Pittsburgh Pro version. Remember, if you guys like these types of videos, be sure to hit the like button and subscribe for more. I know that we've just started the video, but this is probably where the audience retention plummets, and it's all because of my call here. I have Nick winning the front double biceps. Now we're going to use the same 2, 3, 4 point system that we always do in my comparisons, and yes, this will definitely be a narrow 2-pointer win for Nick, but nonetheless, this is still a win. I hate to be a Debbie Downer about Behrooz. Truthfully, I am extremely hyped for his first Olympia, but I still want to be realistic, and with that, we have some of his issues that we need to address. The main issue he has is taking up half the pose in our first shot. It's his quads. The size isn't that good, although it's not even my main gripe with them. It's the weird lack of separation. I remember Brandon getting shit on for his legs, but I have to say, they're better than Behrooz's, and yeah, Nick's are too. We can just start here for dissecting the pose. Nick wins the quads, clearly, actually. He's definitely more detailed and separated, and has the superior development too. Nick also wins some other things. He has more midsection detail, and of course, he notches a win in the arms. And overall, he's clearly more muscular and detailed. We could argue that he's perhaps too muscular, but that's open to you. With that said, Behrooz does win in terms of shape, but for me, that's not going to be enough to carry him to a win, because Nick is simply doing so much more than just bringing a small waist. It's still a close shot, like I said. We're going to be split into 2 groups, the size queens or the Swifties, which stands for small waist I'd like to fondle till I eventually splooge.
Please stop, Dylan.
I would be more than fine with shape being the deciding factor if Behrooz was doing more of what Nick is doing. Here, Nick is just too far ahead in terms of muscularity, completeness, and even detail, so he takes the first shot. If you didn't click off the video from the first call I made, allow me to try and extend an olive branch. Obviously, Behrooz is going to take the front lat spread. Everyone does against Nick. But I could and probably should take a point off of Behrooz's margin for Nick exposing Behrooz's main flaw and bringing terrific legs himself. However, I won't do that. In order to try to appease some of you that were upset from my last pose, I'll go ahead and make this the full 4 points. Let's be honest, Nick doesn't have a chance in hell anyway, better legs or not. After that trouncing, let's get back to some mildly questionable calls. As much as some of you guys will probably hate to admit it, I am right in giving this pose to Behrooz. I know everyone starts dick riding Nick when talking about the side shots, but I have to say, I don't think his side chest is the absolute best. And at Pittsburgh, since he came in so shredded, he lost a lot of fullness in his chest, which cripples him in this shot. Honestly, these guys gotta watch out for Behrooz in this shot. From the side, he doesn't lack any thickness, which is weird because from the front he looked a little slender, but not only that, he's actually very complete as well. He definitely wins the chest. I also prefer him in the arm and delt for this shot. I think the waistline probably goes without saying too. Nick takes up a lot of space on this one, which on the surface would be a good thing, but a lot of it is just taken up by the midsection, which doesn't help his cause. Now downstairs, he does win. His side leg is big and nasty, just the way I like it, but Behrooz is great too, just not quite on the level of Nick. But honestly, even though Behrooz does have these other things going for him, I knew my winner just by looking at the chest. Nick is good in a lot of things in this pose, but I gotta have a good chest in my side chest pose. So some of you may not expect it, but Behrooz takes a 2-point win in the side chest. Here in the rear double, we have another underrated pose for Behrooz. I think his back is great, but flies under the radar because he hasn't yet been compared to the best of the best. However, while it may be great, it's just not on the level of Nick's. Still though, it pretty much does everything. He just happens to be next to what is probably the best rear double pose right now. Behrooz's back is wide, detailed, and pretty developed, and his lower body isn't weak here at all like it is from the front. In fact, it's a strong point. But top to bottom, Nick turns things up a notch. His back is even more thick, dense, and grainy, and his lower body from the rear is not only the best of this era, but maybe even of all time. It's definitely arguable. The sheer size and width of his thighs from the rear is untouchable in this modern era, and he's certainly in condition, although Behrooz does win the glutes for those cleaner lines. So top to bottom, Nick is the winner here. I have to say though, I've now done a comparison with Derek and Nick, and with that knowledge from those comparisons, I am prepared to say that I think Behrooz will have a top 4 rear double at the Mr. Olympia. The only people I see beating him are Derek and Nick, of course, and maybe Regan. Tonio could, could, I guess, but I don't see that. Check them out at this year's Dubai Pro version if you don't believe me. But even though Behrooz is in the top 4, maybe even the top 3 in this shot, I think we can all agree that there is a clear divide between the top 2 in this shot in the world and then everyone else. With that said, and with Nick's top to bottom win in the pose, although this is a great shot for Behrooz, I think I still have to give Nick 3 points. I mean, that is what I gave Derek in his matchup, so it makes sense. For this back pose, we're still in Nick Walker territory, but not as deep, so I'm going to make this a 2-point win instead of a 3-point win. For this one, it's going to be like the front double front last spread situation. I want to try to appease the majority of you, or at least what I think is the consensus in my mind, because that's probably the most objective way to go about things. But the second reason I want to narrow this one up is because it is more narrow. I actually like Behrouz's back here more. His back is slightly wider, and in this pose, he's the one with the better separation, especially in the mid back. He's just slightly better all around. However, Nick once again stakes a strong claim on the lower body. So we have a split pose. Overall, I'm going with who is more balanced and complete in this pose. Both guys are complete for sure. I'm not saying Behrouz is incomplete, but Nick's back is a lot closer to Behrouz's than Behrouz's lower half is closer to Nick's lower half. And basically that means Nick is more developed and has the better average top to bottom. I can see an argument for Behrouz though. He's very complete too. Definitely not lacking in the lower half, but he has the slightly better back. One could say because they both tick the lower body box, then the edge can go to the one who wins the back. I have no issues with that argument at all, so this pose definitely has to be closer than the last one. I'm still erring on the side of Nick, but Behrouz could take the 2 points here as well. The sizing on the second side pose here is a bit wonky because there wasn't a good pick of Nick with a good angle, but regardless, I don't think it matters a whole lot. I have him taking the side tricep with a narrow margin, but in that margin, he's still pretty secure. Now, his posing at this year's Pittsburgh Pro was not as good as years past, but it's better than Behrouz's. Besides the quads from the front, Behrouz's #1 issue is actually his posing. I mean, this one looks like it hurts. Behrouz's best area on the shot is coincidentally Nick's, that being the side leg. They're both good, but Nick's going to take the dub here like he did in the last side pose. Then up top, the better presentation really helps Nick out. I like his abs more, they're thicker and more deeply separated, and Behrouz doesn't really do himself any favors by hunching over. It diminishes what could have been a very strong part of his pose. It's kind of the same deal on the pecs. Behrouz has the thickness but is too closed off and hunched over to do anything with that thickness. And finally, although he is striated in the delt, that separation does not at all translate to the rest of his arm. Behrouz only has a concept of a tricep in this pose, but in practice, where is it? To be honest, I could have Nick winning the whole pose based on his win in the tricep alone. A lot like Behrouz only needed to win the chest to win the side chest. Nick has other things going for him, but I gotta have a tricep in my side tricep shot. I think if Behrouz really tweaked this pose, he could maybe even snag the pose from Nick, but right now this is Nick's shot. But I'll go ahead and make it the same margin to match Behrouz's in the side chest. If the front double was my most controversial call in this video, then this is going to be a close second. However, this one is way more obvious than the front double, dare I say. I have Nick taking the abs and thighs somewhat convincingly. I don't know if that's a good enough word to describe the situation, but I think a 3-point win sums it up. To me, Behrouz doesn't even win the abs, although they are good. I'm not saying they aren't, but I prefer Nick's thicker abs with that crazy separation between them. And in terms of the waistline and taper, yes, Behrouz wins, but in the actual pose itself, they're really not that different here. And in the quads, Nick takes a clear and decisive win, so where does that leave us? In 3-point territory. Nick wins top to bottom here. Behrouz is solid from the waist up, but falls off a cliff below the belt. Honestly, with that said, I think it's probably closer to a 4-point win than a 2-pointer. Behrouz still has great abs though, which saves him from the worst case scenario. And finally, we have the most muscular. A lot of people get caught up in the hype for Behrouz's most muscular, and for good reason. He has some solid strengths here, but that awful quad weakness persists. Nick wins easily, we can get that out of the way, but what about up top? Well, we have another slightly controversial opinion, but it favors Behrouz this time, as I actually favor him in the upper half on this pose. He's bigger overall compared to Nick and wider. He holds his own in the arms and delts. I even prefer him for this pose, to be honest. And he has the better chest for sure. The only thing I wouldn't give him are the abs. However, let's ask ourselves a question. What's weaker, Behrouz's lower body or Nick's upper body? Well, although I hate to sound like a broken record, that's the answer to yet another pose. Look, Nick's upper half is freaky and is just barely behind Behrouz's, if at all, but those legs on Behrouz are absolutely pitiful. And they look even worse because his top half is so fantastic. So anyway, even though Behrouz clinches a small win up top, for the overall pose, he's just missing too much, half the body even. So Nick takes a final 2-point win in the first round of judging for a freaky but more well-rounded and complete pose. Next, we have the second round of judging, which consists of the 4 overall physique categories: muscularity, condition, shape, and flaws. Let's start with muscularity. Now, Nick is the most complete bodybuilder right now from a muscularity perspective. Not only that, but he has great freak factor and pound-for-pound muscularity. Behrouz is pretty complete too, outside of one huge weakness, and at this point, we know what that is. Just think of how many points he lost because of his quads. I mean, Nick, of all people who is often criticized for his quads, was schooling him in that area. The fact is, Behrouz has a glaring gap in every front pose, and he's going against the most complete guy guy in the world right now. Honestly, even if you did give Behrooz slightly better quads for this matchup, I don't know if that would be enough to beat Nick. With that said, I was going to make this 3 points. Not only is Nick more complete everywhere else besides the quads, but he's also more muscular as a whole. However, I wanted to touch on another thing that bugs me about Behrooz's quads, and in my opinion, it hurts him in another category too. His quads are not only underdeveloped, but they lack any meaningful separation, and I think that costs him the conditioning category as well. Nick is not only the most complete guy, but back to front, top to bottom, he's the most conditioned guy out there as well. And once again, Behrooz has one piece of him that really becomes a detriment. So here's what I'm going to do. I'm going to give Nick 2 points in both the condition and muscularity categories. Maybe you think that's heavy-handed. I say his quads will be one of the weakest body parts in the top 10, and probably the weakest legs on stage. Either way, I gotta punish Behrooz for this. It's a massive gap. The alternative would just be giving Nick a 3-point win in muscularity and leaving condition as a tie, so we're debating a 3 or 4 point loss for Behrooz, which at that point really doesn't matter. Anyway, let's flip the script. In the shape category, Behrooz deserves quite a big victory here. I think Nick's shape is passable for open with the version we used today, so I might only go for a 3-pointer here, but since I was maybe a little heavy-handed towards Behrooz in the last 2 categories, I'll give Behrooz the full 4 points here. In fact, this leads right into our next category, which is flaws, and I'll even give Behrooz a small win here. Not only is Nick's structure bad, but he also had a problem at the Pittsburgh holding his stomach in between poses. And while those 2 things I mentioned are part of the same problem, I think they're different enough to hit him on each of them. Now, I won't go any further than a 2-point win for Behrooz. I still think we're being pretty fair here, making Nick lose both the categories, but we don't need to go overboard. And Behrooz's posing sucks too. He loses balance, shakes at times, and struggles to hold poses. And there's just no excuse for that. Is Nick's issue with posing worse? To the majority of fans, probably, but both guys have some major issues at that point because in my opinion, Behrooz is just as bad. But still, I'll give Nick the 2-point loss here because poor stomach control is going to be even more unpopular. Alright, now we've reached the end of this matchup and it's time to reveal the final scores. Winning this comparison with 60.1 points was the mutant Nick Walker, leaving Behrooz Tabani with 39.9 points. Some people will have seen this coming, but I think I'll probably be going against the grain with this choice. A lot of fans will probably be on Behrooz's side, but either because they bought into the hype too much or they're too preoccupied with the small waist. Overall, this is pretty easy to understand. I think I even said my main point in our first pose. I am absolutely okay with shows and matchups coming down to shape and aesthetics, but that can't be the only thing someone wins on. Now, Behrooz is pretty developed and complete outside of a very weak set of quads, but he's not on the same level of development as Nick. Besides the chest, Behrooz couldn't win any body part consistently across all the poses, and he's definitely just not as muscular overall as Nick. And Behrooz, of course, really got exposed in the quads, only adding insult to injury. Even Nick's overall back to front, top to bottom condition was a little better, or at least a little more consistent than Behrooz's. These wins for Nick, that more hardcore bodybuilding criteria of muscle and condition, led him to a decisive win in our first round of judging. I'll just say it right now, outside of Hadi Chupin, he has the best set of mandatory poses right now. If you want to beat Nick, you gotta do as well as you can and really push him in the mandatories while taking a big win in the second round of judging. It takes a very special physique to do that. You simultaneously have to be pretty maxed out and complete, but also very well rounded. On the scorecard, Behrooz only took 2 poses. Now, I can get arguments for the front double and the rear lat spread, but those are still close poses any way you slice it. I don't really think I could change my opinion on either of them, but I get why some might. And then in the overall categories, Behrooz's win just wasn't enough. Some of you might say I'm not putting enough emphasis on shape, but remember, I gave Nick a 6-point loss in that one round for just one issue pretty much. So Behrooz simply just wasn't doing what you have to do to beat Nick. He didn't keep it close enough in round 1 and he didn't slam the door hard enough in round 2. Really, the only 2 physiques I want to place ahead of Nick, and only sometimes, are Hadi and Samson, and that latter one is kind of a stretch. Nick's development and condition are second to none right now, and it's going to take more than a small waist to beat that. It can certainly be part of a reason why somebody wins, but they gotta have other things going for them. Behrooz will still be competitive, they could even place pretty close to each other, but I think there's still going to be a gap between them that favors Nick. With that said, this is my own judging. The judges love shapely guys right now, probably too much, but because of that, sometimes my opinions in these matchups are different from my predictions. It's not that I don't stand by my analysis, it's that sometimes I just don't agree with the judges. But I'm not quite anticipating that for this matchup. Behrooz could beat Nick, it's not off the table, but it's not my prediction. Behrooz is a big what if right now with crazy potential, but Nick is a tried and true competitor. I know what I'm getting with him. It may not be the prettiest, but it's going to take more than just a small waist and a good looking physique to beat Nick Walker.